just made a little quick information list of some of the facts about the CCC. So that's what those little sheets are. You can take those with you if you want. Good. Oh, yes, you may.
Yeah, when I lived here and I went and visited.
Can't read it.
Extras on this side?
Yeah, we had one.
And I like I said, I was on the board, everything, I got
Oh, that is nice.
and anyway, we started with Station Park. And so there's a CCC. And I found exactly would you like one of these? So we started a new code.
Are you all set with what you have?
But I'm still friends. It really is. It's a family.
All right, well,
Welcome, everybody. Wow, that's loud. Okay, so I'm Danny Mortensen. I'm the president of the Friends of Interstate and Straight Lake Park Board this year. And so I get the opportunity to do the introduction. So this is Nancy Beck. I'm guessing all of you know already or are learning about her while you were finding out about the program. But she is a long-time volunteer and was on the board as well. So she's been involved in projects and building the park up and making it better for everyone. She's a local, lives in the area right around the river here and adores monarchs, hummingbirds, gardening, and obviously talking about CCC. So let's give her a round of applause to welcome her, and I welcome you guys too. After the presentation, please do come into the classroom, which is at the back of the building here. There are some artifacts and more information about CCC at the park, and refreshments like cheese and crackers, fruit, veggies, and some flavored water. Pretty yummy. So come on back after the presentation, and I'll leave it to Nancy. You can move that down if you need to.
I got it a little bit different.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming out tonight. I'll just give you a little background how I got so invested in the CCC. I always had been kind of interested. I grew up in Osceola, and coming to the park all the time, you know, you see that space down there where there's the sign that's always been there. It's like, this camp was there? How did this all fit in that space? And what exactly did they do here and all of that stuff? So that was an interest for me. And when I got on the board, right at the time COVID hit, so we couldn't do some of the other things that we wanted to do. But one thing that there was interest among the board was that we wanted to have more information about the CCC and the camp. Many people would come in, and still do, come into the gift shop and ask about it. And we were really realizing that that history is getting lost. I mean, even at my age group, I'm not a youngster, but more and more people didn't know what it was, and you go back to my children's ages and it's just not in their mind at all as to what actually happened with this program. And it's astonishing what this program accomplished across the United States. So we started raising some money. Trudy's back there. There's you know, several of us that worked in different ways, and the superintendents here at the park both helped us apply for some state funding that we got. And so we were able to get the ball rolling with that. And then at about that same time, a gentleman, George Kulik, contacted the superintendent here at the park. And he had all of this memorabilia from his father, who had been here, an enrollee at Camp Interstate. And he was downsizing, and he was looking to find a home for all of this interesting stuff. And that just opened up a whole world of ways that we could connect actually these boys living and working here. And I'm not sure if any of you had a chance to see the first 5 signs. I have been done now for about a year, almost a year, and they've been installed, and they are in part of the perimeter of the camp down there where the sign is. It's a very short trail. The bugs can be really bad, but otherwise it's flat and it's short. And that gives a lot of the background, and a lot of the research and the pictures that are put on those signs did come from this young man's is named Jerry Kulik, and it actually is from his camera and his photography book and all of his different insights and what happened to him here. And he was very young. He somehow talked his way in at age 14, and to think of what this teenager did, it was just really a compelling story. So that's really helped draw it together. And then we put out asking for more information from people. We got so many great stories. But again, now these people are the parents, or the children of the parents that maybe were here. Now they're even leaving us. So the stories are getting lost. So we keep trying to find, if anybody has any more information, please let Trudy or I or Matt here at the park know. And if it doesn't fit into our archive, that's okay. We've got connections, other ways that we can do that. So our original project was the 5 signs. They have been now installed. People are enjoying them. We placed them so that you could actually tell, again, that mystery of how did all this park, this Camp Interstate fit into that section. But we did place the signs in this area so that you will be looking right down and at a map as to where the building sat, so that you can visualize where they were. So now we ended up getting an additional grant. We want to put in 4 or maybe 5 more signs, and we are almost complete with those, and those will be installed as soon as we can. So there's a lot of information. We've also found that a lot of information has been lost. We're not sure where it has all disappeared to, even at the federal level. It just seems like a lot of it has not been inventoried correctly or something. We've done different searches and really can't find. So we do have some gaps, but there is a lot of good information out there. And so I was going to start tonight because one of the things that was not so common with the CCC is this archaeological digs. It did happen in a few places across the country, but that was unique to Camp Interstate. So I thought I would lead with that, hoping that maybe if somebody didn't know exactly, they would be interested in what happened with those bones, because it did stop the whole camp. It just ground to a halt while they figured out what to do with these bones. So that's our introduction. And so now we're in August, September, October of 1936. And the work crew was sent out. They were down across from the bathhouse. There's the parking lot right across there. And that is Mountain Meadow, if you know that, where there is a little trail there. That's where they were. And they were needing to dig out trenches and get rid of a lot of that water so that they were trying to put in pipes to put fresh water, to get drinking water down in that part of the park. And so they got all their crew out there. We look at this picture and you can see, there they are in the early winter, but they're working so hard, their shirts are off and they're just digging all that they can get out of there. And it's very muddy and swampy and stuff down there if you've ever walked through that little area. So they really had their work cut out for them, trying to get all that muck out so that they could get the pipes in there. So instead of just being able to lay the pipe, they found something else. They started uncovering bones. And this is the site. Again, we're going into, because this stopped everything at this site. That's why some of these pictures will be in the winter, because they continued to work on it as they could throughout the winter, and then sometimes they just had to stop. So again, this is the little teepee there is the tent that was first put over what they first started finding. So we're down in the area, down there by that parking lot. And this is more in the summer, and you can see the trees, but all those little things that are sitting there were marking spots where they had found different bones. So they were marking that whole area. And they called in experts from all over. One thing we really did have that was unusual that helped so much with the importance of this find was a man named Alonzo Pond. And his history is very intertwined with Interstate Park. And he is at the time, he was a world-renowned archaeologist and anthropologist, and he had been all over. And he was hired by the state of Wisconsin to watch over, like, if something like this happened. He in particularly appeared to love to be at Interstate because he was here a lot. He served as superintendent off and on. So he was here. So he got all of the right resources put together to keep this dig going, instead of nobody really knowing what to do with something like this in our part of the country. So some more pictures. It's a little bit hard to see, but these are pictures of actually where they took the bones out of. You can see the markers and all of that. And they ended up finding just a really puzzling mix of things. Dr. Pond was so interested because he felt that this was going to be one of the oldest records of humans in Wisconsin, is why he was so excited to see this. And the story continues from there, but they really did investigate this. They couldn't quite figure out what they were finding for bones. You know, there had been talk that had been a butchering site for a farm family that had lived here, and maybe a brewery there, and you know, all these other factors that could have contributed to why these bones were there. But they were finding, you know, some unusual things at the time. So they ended up finding 44 bones in all, actually more than that for bison and the elk and the deer. And they did end up agreeing that it was an extinct species of bison. And nobody was sure about that for a while. And unfortunately, you know, we had these different items here at the park for a long time. And then probably in the 70s, somebody decided, well, that's not safe to have them at the center here. So they took them to Madison and actually put them in one of the museums, and now they can't be found. So it's like, they should have stayed at the park. So we don't know where they are right now. The tools were important. It really was investigated. They came as recently as 2009. The state did another evaluation of the site and of what they could find, and looked over all the field notes and all that sort of thing. And they did decide it was more recent of a dig than what they had expected, but they still felt that it was, that still was the bison, which was an extinct species of bison. So it still was an important find. So that's something that's not associated with the CCC very much, but it was important to them in Interstate. And only a couple spots around the country had that. So there's my guy, Alonzo. I feel like I know him a little bit. He was born in Wisconsin, very highly respected. He was often frustrated with trying to keep track of a lot of things that were being dug up, and you know, to keep control of that whole thing. So he was really interested in what was being found across across the country, and he was constantly impressed with the amount of work, physical work that was done here at Interstate in particular, and he had traveled to many parks. He was a consultant in many parks. So if any of you are interested, here's a little plug for this great little green book, but this tells all about the park and the CCC, some of the Native American history, and it's all, by Dr. Pond. So and it was written in the 30s. We sell it at the gift shop. It's not very expensive. At this time it was only $3. I think maybe it's $4 now or something. But if you have it, there's some great pictures in there. If you have any interest that you want to see more what was going on from Dr. Pond's viewpoint, we've got that little book right there. So he played such an important part here at Interstate. And I've talked to a couple people having researched him a little more. He has an interesting life. He could probably be his own topic right there. He was a very interesting man. And he was right here and really progressed the Interstate Park for us. All right, so who were that crew? What is the CCC and why are they here? And probably most everyone here knows what the CCC is. But it was desperate times when President Roosevelt started this program, and people literally were starving, and it was hit really in the rural areas. So this program was trying to get the unemployed young men back to work, and it was also to help restore some of our natural resources that had been, a lot of trees taken down, a lot of buildings we were trying to get back. They were trying to develop the national parks more. And so this program offered many ways to help the country. And the boys came, they learned skills, they received an education, and they sent money home to their families. $25 went to the families, $5 went to the enrollee, and that made all the difference to these families. And it just, at Interstate, just a huge enduring legacy all across Wisconsin and the United States. And who were these boys? We came up with a whole list. They were young, 17 to 25, not married, unemployed. Their families were on financial assistance. They had to be at least 5 feet tall, weigh 107 pounds, and we love this, that they had to have at least 6 teeth. So, it's like they were very specific. In Wisconsin, just a little background, because Interstate was not the only camp by any means. There was 100 camps all over the state. They tailored the work at each camp to what the area needed. So overall, a lot of work was done on trails and buildings and fresh water and replanting trees, but it all really depended on where they were in the part of the state. Millions of trees, improved the soil conservation, fought fires. They installed electricity, and if you think back to the mid-30s, what a difference that made to get electricity in our rural areas, and they help with that, and phone lines. Roads, trails, structures, bridges, you name it, they would figure out how to build it and get it done. Just a few highlights from in Wisconsin, if you've traveled around to different parks. Rib Mountain, they cleared trees and they built ski trails and toboggan runs. And so the CCC is credited with really jump-starting the skiing in the United States. Up until that time, we really didn't have ski runs. And by them doing that in certain parts of the country, that got people enthralled with going skiing, and that got the ski trails going. Of course, here at Interstate, if you've been able to walk around at all, you see their work everywhere, all this hard labor of building these steps and trails, and again, what we don't notice, the hard digging there was to get fresh water into different places, and it goes on and on. At Croix State Park, which is along the river a little bit further south of us, there are a couple of really great buildings there that they used stone that was quarried nearby, as they did in Interstate too. Pattison up by Superior, water, sewer, and they also made a beach. They hauled all that sand. If you've ever been up to Pattison Park, they hauled all that sand from Lake Superior to make that beach there. Copper Falls, another beautiful state park. The fire towers, bridges, benches, campgrounds, structures, parking lots, picnic tables. They have a really nice couple of trails dedicated and explain the CCC up there as well. And Devil's Lake, which is kind of considered the crown jewel, I think, of state parks. You can see their work all over that park. And it was similar to here. A lot of the trails and cutting out the rock and making the beautiful buildings. And then one thing I did not know, because I don't know much about that Army ammunition plant, but after the CCC was done, it was merging into World War II, and so they used that location at Devil's Lake to assist with the Army ammunition during World War II. So it kept working, people working after CCC was done. So now we get to Camp Interstate. And the first camp is 633. I've got on the sheet, the history, because we actually did end up having 3 different camps here. But the first one is 633. And there's a bunch of cool pictures of what it looked like. And a bunch of boys in there, and we have, out of that picture, I've had some people be able to recognize their relative out of there. So I'm not sure exactly what year that was taken, but I think it was pretty early on. So here's the basic history. 633 was put together and was sent here by rail from Grafton, Illinois. And that was where they were trained, and so there was a lot of camps that got started there because that's where they went for their initiation and stuff. But they came up here in 633. They were disbanded in 37. And the parks were moving, the camps were moving all around as they got work done at certain ones. So that wasn't unusual for the camps to come and go like that. So the next one that came in was 4610. And that included some of the members that were here, some other local camp members, because Pattison up there had their own camp. There were several others. So guys that were left over from those other camps were joined here. And that started in July of 38. They disbanded in 41. And by then we were getting mobilized to get into World War II. So things were really slowing down. They were having trouble finding enough enrollees. I think the program could have kept going, but the young men were going actually into the services instead of doing this, or they're drafted. So the WPA, Works Projects Administration, took over across the country, and they came and completed all the projects that were not finished when the CCC camp disbanded. And I just touched that a little bit, why the camps disband. They just didn't have enough enrollees anymore. The war was, and their attentions were going to the war. It wasn't quite as desperately needed. And the young men that took advantage of this program were being drafted and they were gone. Here's a quote that I see so often, again from Dr. Pond. The crews in Interstate Park could compete with the hard labor used to build Egypt's towering pyramids. That's how much he felt from all of his worldly experience, how difficult it was working with the trap rock and what they had to deal with here. And they did have some machinery, but not much. The whole philosophy of what the National Park Service presented was that things be that fit in with their natural surroundings. So they didn't want big equipment rolling through and taking down trees or changing the landscape in that way. So that meant there was a lot of hard labor. And I think probably, you know, if you all have been familiar, besides finding the bones, what else did these guys do here? And they did most everything you could think of. Everywhere you look, you find some example of what they worked on. All the trails, you know, over 10 miles of trails. And think about all that rock was split, carried out by hand. And if they needed to rebuild, they carried it back up there, and it's just astonishing. The bathhouse, and even these guys hauled in 6,000 pounds of sand for the beach here. They basically built the beach. The Horizon Trailside Shelter, the old park office, which is used for storage now. It's across from the pothole trail, that beautiful building that sits right on the curve. That was the park office when they built it. Very nice building. You know, over a mile digging in those conditions of 3-inch water pipe to get water around the park. That was no small feat either. So what else did they do? Picnic tables, fireplaces, trail signs. They built 2 other shelters. You know, the Meadowview picnic shelter, that's the nice one with the double fireplace that's by the amphitheater. And Sunset Beach, or it's also called Echo Canyon on some maps. That one is right down on the river. It's getting harder to get to. All that's left is the fireplace. You can see it if you take the boat trip, the Minnesota from Taylor's Falls. You can see it. It's a little bit harder to get to. It's quite a walk to get down there. But that Sunset Beach was critical. That is where the CCC brought in a lot of their supplies came in, and that's why they had a shelter in the beach area there. They cleared areas for the parking and picnic areas. Collision Curve. Do you all know where Collision Curve is? If you've seen that on maps, I'm not sure how old a map that has to be, but you know, that is the sharp curve that gets that spectacular view of the park. And that was there, but it was very dangerous and the road was more narrow, and so they rebuilt, you know, that whole wall, and they split the road. And that right there was just a huge feat of engineering to put that stone and make that suitable for a more road traffic. Unfortunately, none of the stone water fountains are left, but they had, at one time, there were 10 of them across the park. They even counted cars and visitors at the park and just helped with the visitors that came. Sodded picnic areas, cleared large stones. They actually built boulder walls to hide where they had taken some of the other materials off. So again, the attitude was really just to leave the land the way that they found it. So they would reconstruct things to make it look like before they had gotten there. To drain all that water that was in up there by the bathhouse, they constructed 2 20,000-gallon cement reservoirs to help make more of the park usable because of all the water. They tiled springs. They hauled logs out of the St. Croix River from the log jams, and they used those for the construction of the building. So even just getting these logs out of the river and hauled up to use them. And then they cleaned out the potholes on the pothole trail, so that, you know, they were all filled in with all different sorts of debris and stuff. And so they would take the grinder stone out. Imagine getting that out of some of those potholes, clean it all out, and then they would put the grinder back in so that we actually can explore the potholes now. So all this just physical work. So how did they accomplish all this? And the pictures I see, you know, the Trudy and the sign designer, it's like, where are these guys' mothers? You see these pictures that these guys are hanging off cliffs, or they're tied together, or whatever. It's just, they just really depended on each other, and they worked together. And it's all about leverage, I guess, because they could figure out how to do a lot of things. And they worked all year long. I think one place I saw that if it was 20 below, they didn't have to go out, but there were a lot, especially that winter, I read time and again, of 36 to 37 was one of the harshest winters ever in Wisconsin. And that was when they got a lot of this work done, especially around the lake, doing those trails. You probably heard about the fire in icy water. This is an old technique. They would heat up all the stone and keep the fire. They'd build fires on top of these stone ledges that they wanted to break apart. And they kept that fire going sometimes all night to get it hot enough to crack. And then they would pour water on it and the rock would crack, and then they could physically take these pieces out and haul them away or work them into the stairs and stuff that we walk on today. And they did that all over the park. And this technique was also used, we're pretty sure, at Rib Mountain, because they have some of the same rock that we do, and I think at Devil's Lake. So that is just astonishing right there, that they could, that's how they moved all that rock around without using drills or excavators or anything. I just put some pictures together because all these faces, you know, they're just, reports that I read consistently say how well cared for these guys were, how much they liked their work. They really felt like they were doing something important. Some got homesick, of course, but overall, they were treated very well. They often came to when they were enrollees, they were underweight, they literally were starving. They even just had to feed them and nurse them for a while before they could ask them to do any work. It was really desperate times. So they were just part of something bigger, and they took great pride in their work. And they had a community, and they could really see results of the work that they were doing. This one I love. This is you know, the smallest and the biggest. When you think of, I think of that 14-year-old you know, Harry Kulick, you know, that had to have been about his size. And then you look at one of the full-grown men and how different they could be. And that's at Camp Riverside, which was a very small camp between us and Camp Pattison. So that was just a picture that stuck out to me, that how different they could be. So some more pictures, you know, the crew up on the Horizon Rock. You know, like I said, they did have some heavy equipment here. We do have pictures of that and some dump trucks, but generally, you know, even if you look at the picture, you know, there are guys in ropes, and they're taking the rocks off there too, as well as the excavator. They played a lot of baseball, and then the other picture is just some more work that they're doing in the middle of winter, and they're trying to pour cement and do whatever it is that they're doing. So they kept busy all the time. Some more, this shows the water fountains. That's like the only picture I can find actually of what the water fountains look like. And then just another of park life. I'm not sure what all they were doing, but it was a picture that shows some of the buildings too. So what was life like at Camp Interstate? As many of you, if you have a military background, you know it was its own complete town. It had a mess hall, bathhouse, sick bay, barracks, recreation, education, garages, warehouses, and its own water tower. And again, when you walk the trail now and see the one sign, you will be standing kind of at this point where you would be looking right down the middle of the camp, and at the end would have been the water tower. So this is the picture that you're kind of looking at. And we had to dig around a little bit to find where this picture was taken, because there's many taken from this angle. And we did finally figure it out using old maps. We're just across, you know, there is a hill right across from the camp, and if you go up there, they call it, at that time, they called it the Big Pines. And there are a lot of pine trees up there. And if you were up that far, and there wasn't the tree growth that there is now, you know, the trees were a lot smaller in these pictures, you can tell where that picture was taken. These are inside. These are both barracks at Camp Interstate, what they would have looked like inside. In their day, you know, again, just very very organized. They didn't have much time to mess around during the day. This really always amazed me that they actually made them exercise for 15 minutes and then they would go dig up this trap rock. It's like, but I'd also read that, and this was kind of ahead of their time a little bit, is they really worked to help the guys not hurt themselves. So they would do stretching and teach them things like, and how to lift correctly and do things like that. So I think they were doing things like that during that organized time too, to try to keep them healthier. Again, they were done at dinner time, supper time, 5:15, and then in the evenings, they would start a whole another course of work. That was when they actually learned their trades, and they could learn just about anything. Teachers from the community would come, because many of the boys, I read somewhere, like a lot of them, 50-60% did not have their high school diplomas. So one thing they did in the evenings was try to get those skills up. They would have craftsmen come from the area and work with them and teach them. So they all came out ready to be able to do work when they were done. And some more pictures. Again, all the guys in the sand up there with their shovels. I have another little bit of story that goes along with that. Fishing, a lot of them like to fish in the lake. They swam in the lake. They did, all the stuff around here that they could to enjoy it too. And then I included that picture because they walked on the lake, all winter long, and they tended to work on the Eagle Bluff and all of those trails there in the wintertime. So they were often on that frozen lake, and so the camp was really close to that. And that's what they would start their day, was walking over the frozen lake to get to start working on the trails. And again, I touched on that, but what did they learn? They just learned all sorts of stuff. Anything that you could think of, because they needed somebody to do it, and they were teaching them stuff. They had an orchestra, choir, ping pong, baseball, swimming, fishing, basketball. We've read about them going downtown on occasion, and they were supposed to, respect the downtown people, and sometimes they did, sometimes they didn't. These were young men that had a little bit of money. Their days were full. They had a lot going on. And when we think about and see some of these pictures, yes, you have 150 to 200 young men in dangerous positions, and maybe they don't know how to do certain things. There certainly were injuries, ailments, and accidents. They ran a camp newspaper for much of the time that somebody was here. So we've been reading through some of those that were they would report all these things. So they often had, who was in sick bay and all of that stuff. So just from one end to the other, you can imagine what happened. And then there actually was a very bad accident here in June of 1937. That picture of the guys with all the shovels, that was the sand pit that it's actually, is behind, it's the Esker, it's behind the medical center, it's that area where it was a sand pit at the time. Yeah.
Actually, it's right across from 3 Arrows. That accident happened right across from 3 Arrows.
Yep, okay. So that's where they were. It's gruesome when you read, it was well covered by newspaper. It was really a significant accident. And 4 ended up dying. 3 of them were the CCC boys. And the widowed father of 6 children was a St. Croix Falls man. So things like that did happen too, unfortunately. Then I just wanted to touch on and encourage everybody to, if you in traveling times, or maybe you already have noticed that, but there are projects across the whole United States that we can still see. The camps themselves were meant to be mobile, and they were picked up and they were like gone. You know, they just, but they were mobile units. They weren't expected to stay around that long. But the legacy of the CCC is everywhere. So I just always put that, kind of give a challenge to everybody, is start looking to see those projects, because they're almost everywhere. You know, when you think about 3.5 billion trees they planted just during that time, that's a lot of trees. Created 711 state parks, and those states listed had no state parks before the CCC. So they came to Interstate, and at least the park was here, but it was inaccessible basically because of the terrain. So they made it so that people could actually enjoy it. The Watchman Trail, that's the famous trail at Zion, they built that. Acadia, if you've been to there in Maine, all the trails and the campgrounds there. Theodore Roosevelt National Park, and then the largest spring-fed swimming pool in Texas. And that's just a few of the biggest ones. There really are things to be seen everywhere. A lot of days fighting fires, lookout towers, helped with a lot of soil erosion, and again launched the American ski industry before they came and made that possible. So keep your eyes open for projects everywhere. It's fun to see what you can find. And I want to leave with a quote by President Franklin Roosevelt. The nation will owe you a debt of gratitude 100 years hence. And we're almost there. You know, he said this in 1935, and we're sitting here in Interstate Park, and not in a building that the CCC made, but certainly trails that we maybe just walked on today or yesterday, or the buildings that we can see, the importance that Interstate has provided to the county and the city of St. Croix Falls. More and more importance of getting outside and recreation for so many benefits. So here we are. We still are enjoying what the CCC had done. That's it.
Nancy, may I add a couple of things?
Certainly. This is Steve Jensen. I was hoping that he'd come. He knows a lot about this topic, and I was hoping if we got a few things wrong, he could help us get things straight or whatever. So I'm going to turn it over to Steve, and you can let us in.
So if you don't know who I am, I'm Steve Jensen. I grew up in the area. I spent 37 years here at Interstate Park, 32 of those as supervisor of maintenance and development. So one of the things that in this building that connects this building to the CCC is the stone wall that you see here. I had the opportunity to work with people that had worked with the CCC, and I actually helped build part of the wall around on the south side of the bathhouse. Walter Hooverman helped build that, and I learned a lot from him in regards to that. But in order to connect this building, the CC, and our geography and geology, the wall is out here is constructed in the way that the Civil Conservation Corps would construct it. The way it was done, you take one rock, if it doesn't fit in that spot, you move it down, try another one, move it down until you use it all up. Actually, they had hired a stonemason from Canada to come down, and when he came down and the guys that were working with it had already kind of helped him get going on it, he goes, I don't need to be here, but anyway. The other thing about, if you noticed the physical attributes, For an enrollee, they were military. The reason that we in the United States were able to mobilize as many people as we did at the beginning of World War II was because of the Civil Conservation Corps. Because again, as Nancy pointed out, the regimen that they had was the same regimen that the military was using at the time. So, yeah, that's, and we know, and I know knew a number of the other CC members and so forth that were here in this area, so.
Hi, Steve. I remember about 20 or 25 years ago, I can't remember just exactly, but there was a member of the CCC boys that came to a program here, and it was down by the camp.
Right.
He was quite elderly at that time, but he gave a really interesting talk.
Yeah. Just so you understand, too, when you're looking at Camp Interstate, and I have to look at your, I haven't seen your displays yet, but the main shelter that sits down there actually sits in the location of the recreation hall at the time. Was it intentional? No, it was just dumb blind luck when we put it in. But we knew that the hall was right in that area, so. But yeah, this is, if it wasn't for the CCs, and trust me, I've had to repair some of their stuff. They did it really good, and it was difficult, so.
Have there been any studies done on the,
Pardon?
have there been any studies done on the graduates of this program? What the young men did once the CCC closed?
Okay.
Am I saying?
I can't say that I've seen any official studies. I just heard a lot of, stories. They would save up that $25 that they had got, if they could, and then they would have this little bonus to give their guy when he came back home. And that's what happened with the George Kulik, with our guy with the signs, was that's what his family had been able to do. So when he got done, he was only 17 or, he was young, but he had this little nest egg, and he went on eventually, he went into war and, earned a Purple Heart and medals. He was at the Battle of the Bulge, and that's all on the signs, what he did in the war. But when he came back, he was able to start his own plumbing company in California, and he had done so well that then he passed on an education fund to each of his family members. That our understanding, because his son Harry is the Harry's the dad, George is the son. He still is in contact with us and gives us updates as to what his family had done. So that story was common with the number of people that I've talked to. Certainly that's not everybody, but I'm not sure the follow-up was there because of the massive undertaking of World War II. Records got lost, misplaced, not inventoried, whatever. And I think it was because the country was just so, working so hard at World War II.
There was a fire. There was a fire in the government storage facility, the salt caves under St. Louis, that in the early 70s, that wiped out just about all of World War I records, as well as a number of the records of the Civil Conservation Corps and so forth. So today, with the technology we have, they could have salvaged a lot of those, but government, it went away. In fact, one of my relatives, his his records, even though he was new, you know, wasn't as old as World War I and the Civil Conservation Corps. His were lost in that same fire. So
That reminded me of, because I just found this out not too long ago, the Peace Corps is considered to be an offshoot of the CCC. It was, it ended up to be a really good structure to it, and so the Peace Corps was started kind of in conjunction with trying to replace some of what the CCC was doing. And I just was talking with a friend of mine who had been with the Peace Corps in Ethiopia, and he was there in 72 to 75. And he was a farming kid from, rural Minnesota. So they sent him to Ethiopia to help the farmers there to understand more about how to grow more efficiently and all that stuff. And he brought CCC documents. I mean, they weren't personal documents, but they were the plans and educational materials for the people that Wally was working with. So there were things like that happening too that I had not heard about in any of my research. So, there's probably a lot of helpful documents out there like that have gotten used in other ways. That is still being productive today, because Wally said they left that there then for the people to continue to use when he came home. So there's lots of little snippets.
always.
But one question I wanted to ask you guys, which these guys would probably be interested in, the superintendent's house, the building down there by the pothole trail, that was the office, built as the office. Did the superintendent of the park actually live there?
So yes, there was living quarters, and one of the superintendents did live upstairs. But it was after World War II,
Okay, all right.
okay? If you go along, go in and go to the south end of the garage on that building, look at the very peak, at the gable, you will notice that it is not the same stonework as what you see with the rest of the building. With the declaration of war, those boys were mobilized. Works Progress had to finish that building. In other words, put the roof on and all of that. They had the plans, but they had to finish that building. And most of those people were either, again, unemployed men in the community, more so than CC came from all over the country. In fact, there were quite a few that came to our camps from Illinois. Even Grafton was the main hub for all Civil Conservation Corps, but a lot of kids, guys out of Chicago came up to here.
Back, if you had been in the park 60 years ago, 1965, you'd have seen 70 young men, including me, working down in the, after the flood. It had flooded and damaged the beaches and everything, and so they hired under the Lyndon Johnson's Neighborhood Youth Corps thing, they hired roughly 70 young men, 16 to maybe 20 or 21, and we worked that summer, manual labor, cleaning the park up, including, our first job was shoveling 7 or 8 inches of sand off the lower part of the river in wheelbarrows and hauling it away. At the time, and I can't remember his name, it was like John Neslin or Nesbitt.
John Nesvold.
What was it?
Nesvold.
Nesvold, okay. He was the head of the park, And by the way, his house was owned by the park, was up on Main Street, down by
Yes.
the Dairy Queen, sort of. And
Yeah, the secondary residence is actually where the mental health counseling is on Main Street.
FTA, probably.
All you need to do is pay attention, look at the stonework in front of it. Again, works progress and civil conservation court. So,
Well, we found the signs, Nancy, that you've been looking for. Didn't find the camera yet or the key.
Okay,
But here is the wonderful sign for CCC here.
Okay.
And this is. The
The
light is blinding.
Yeah.
And this is, you can hold this up.
I can try to hold
And
them
this is the picture of all of the men. But I wanted to say, we spent so much time, I did, because I taught school here for 33 years, trying to find relatives. And I had a Richie Tucker, and he's named after his grandfather who was here, Richard Tucker. And he's from St. Croix Township.
Nice.
He was on the township for many, many years. So that was great, and the name Shenander, they're people that we know that were CCC boys. And even Sharon Kelly, she came to our reenactment with Bill Jamerson, and her father was a CCC boy, but he was not here. And so how many of you can raise your hand and know someone that's a CCC boy? 1, 2, okay.
I think the Hooverman I'm related to.
Okay. Well, I know my father-in-law was at a different camp, and he was a CCC boy too. So, anyhow, it makes it all real, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And we can't thank George enough for all the pictures he brought us and the money he's given us to put up these signs, and all of you have donated to this park many, many times. So it's so great to see you. The book club's here. Thank you very much for coming. Friends that I've made for many, many years, and can't thank you enough, and can't thank Nancy enough. She has spent so much time on this, and it's her thing, and she does a great job. And Steve is just a walking encyclopedia. Thank you so much. This is Maya. Maya, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Maya Liskey. I'm the naturalist here at Interstate. So I do a lot of the programs and stuff, so keep your eye out. Every weekend we have different things going on. Thank you all for coming.
She is the new Julie Fox. I tell you, she is fabulous.
And there are some food and drinks, so please
Yes.
stop in the classroom and eat a little bit for us too.
Yeah, follow me back to the class. Let's have some treats.